Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I love how these little talks have been kind of lining up really well together. And so I'm going to quickly dig into sort of vertical AI agents and how you can unlock industry-specific agents. My name's Jacob. I'm the director of product at Founders Factory. We're a venture capital fund and venture studio, and we build products, year after year. Over the last few years, we've been focusing a lot on vertical AI. And the reason is we believe, we're doubling down on this, is we believe we're moving past sort of horizontal, generic AI, chat-based. But let's dig a bit deeper. Why are we here in this moment? So 3 years ago, everyone's mind was blown when you can chat with an AI. It fundamentally changed the way we interact with AIs. Then 2 years ago, we interact with co-pilots. They started to integrate into the way we do day-to-day business. A lot of people had different AI note takers jumping into their meetings. And then after that, we started to see these vertical AI pilots start to emerge. So industry-specific AIs that started to understand what exactly the use case was. Good examples would be Harvey AI, NVIDIA. And what does that mean for 2025? My belief is that a lot of it moves from these pilot stage AIs into production level code. So things that you're going to see in the hands of users, interacting with users, interacting with real world scenarios. And that's really what I'm going to talk about. But I think it's important to think about why now, like what is that inflection point? There's a few things, in my opinion, that come into play. One is, there's a 10x reduction in how long or the cost of running these models. And in a lot of ways, that helps you to leverage different models. The other piece, too, is that we've seen a 6-month half-life for a lot of models. And so what does that mean? Every 6 months, you're probably aware, is like you're expecting the next model, right? iPhones used to be once a year. AI models, it's every 6 months. We expect something new to come into play. And that essentially means that they're at a pace where adoption is just growing year over year. You can see right here in this graph is that top 500 companies in the world, you can see the adoption rate of AI in day-to-day has doubled year over year. And that just means that this trend is only going to continue. And the question is are you one of the companies that has constantly been testing it, or as an experiment, or a feature, or do you have it actually in production? And we know the story. The ones that are actually pushing features out are going to survive. The ones that are still experimenting with AI, chances are you're probably going to get left behind. So yeah, today I want to go over a quick thing, a simple thing of understanding what is the pain that a lot of industries face. How does AI come into play? How does it help with that? I'm going to go through a few case studies of products that we've actually built in our venture studio that I've had the privilege of being part of. And then finally, I'm going to give you a framework that hopefully will help you to start building starting Monday morning, right? That's the goal. That's why we're all here. But let's start with the problem. So this is a story you've probably heard. This is Mia. She wants speech therapy. She's 4 years old. She's struggling with speech and language difficulties. And she's been waiting for 18 months. And this case isn't unique. 65,000 other children are on the wait list with the NHS. And so you can see here, it's not a case of whether technology can be used, but it's a case of access. And I really think vertical agents come into play to be able to solve some of these issues for them. We've probably been Sam as well along the way. We've all experienced this. You hit your car, you want to get it fixed, you process a claim through your insurer. The insurance journey takes about 26 days on average. This is from one of our partners at Aviva. But the actual repair, which was a bumper issue, only took 2 days. So about 21 to 14 days is spent on just handling data, re-entering data, passing information along between different parties, different systems. And that's just lost time. That's billions of lost revenue, millions of cases being affected by it. And that's where I think really, horizontal AI falls short. You can definitely chat with a lot of the tools. I bet everyone's come across these. Everyone's been talking about them. And they're great for sort of menial tasks or, asking how you'd look like a Ghibli cartoon or, figuring out, telling you what your persona looks like based on how many conversations you've had. But they're quite generic. They are not fit for specific purposes. Whereas if you look at some of the vertical AIs that have, emerged over the last 6 months, they're very domain specific. They're very much focused on tasks. And that results in about 30 to 50% better accuracy compared to generic agents. So, this is something that we try to leverage quite a bit within our venture studio. We try to look at, okay, how do we build these vertical agents more and more so that we can start to disrupt industries rather than looking at horizontal applications. And so this is a good thing to look at. I think, level 5 is, that autonomous organization that we all dream of, where an AI is fully running the entire company. But let's be honest, we're not there yet, right? AI still struggles with giving me proper meeting notes at times. But the reality is we're probably at a stage of level 3, where agents can take on simple human tasks that are repetitive, done multiple times, that requires maybe a small level of decision-making involved in it. And that's really where we think, we are betting with a lot of the investments we're making, a lot of the products we're building. And we think agents are at a great place right now. And I'm going to actually show you 2 examples of products that we have built within our venture studio that I've been part of. On the left is Ogma. It's a speech and language therapy platform. Provides a Aug, which is a speech and language virtual agent. Now, that's really cool and fancy and shiny, but that's actually not where we started. We started with a simple note taker for speech and language therapists, so human agent, a human therapist. And then on the right, we have Jointly AI, which is a insurance-based agent platform. So with Jointly, the goal is that we can improve the time it takes to process an insurance claim by 70%. A lot of it is human tasks, again, like we said, repetitive. 25% of the time, people are just re-entering data that's been entered somewhere else. And so that's where we think agents can come and play and really make the entire process efficient. But again, we didn't build the whole solution from start. We figured out what does an MVP need to look like, and we built a first notification loss system, which is an audio-based voice agent at the front end to then build up usage and leveraging the data that we were getting in. So the problems are quite obvious. I already talked about this problem earlier. 65,000 children on the wait list in the UK alone looking to get speech and language therapy. It takes about 2 years for them to get any support. And then when they do get support, 28% of them are not satisfied with it because they're given generic worksheets. The speech and language therapists are overworked. They just don't have time to cater to these patients. Same thing goes for insurance. We talked about it. A quite generic, simple claim takes about 3 to 4 weeks, when in reality, the actual repair takes about 2 weeks. That's about $35 billion in losses every year, in efficiency loss. And repetitive tasks take about 80% of the time of an operational team that are trying to resolve these cases as quickly as possible. And the worst thing is customers churn. We have had conversations with customers. Customers have responded to surveys with us. Whenever a customer goes through a claims process with their insurer, they're quite likely to churn from that insurer to another customer, to another insurance provider. So let's dig into the first one, Ogma. So Ogma, like I said, is a speech and language therapy platform that provides these fun little creatures called Augs. They sit down with children and basically help them through their speech and language goals, speech and language therapy requirements. The best part is we didn't even start with that. We started with a simple intake tool, an Aug assistant for the speech and language therapist. That resulted in about 30% cut in admin tasks that these speech and language therapists were spending time on, which means we're taking time that they were spending on admin, reversing, and they can now use that with actual patients and actual people. And that results in a lot of more patients getting care, but also low-income families getting care as well for free that they are required to get. And so we start to cut down on that 65,000 children wait list that we were talking about earlier. The infrastructure that we set up for this is, and this is a technical architecture, it's a model that started to sort of feed itself. And this is where I'm gonna say is like, your generic models can't be used for this purpose. So we start with a human therapist and we attach this Ogma assistant to it that's constantly taking notes, giving them recommendations on tools they should use or techniques they should use, which then in turn, based on some of the input that we're getting on what the children are saying, was feeding our proprietary phoneme model. Now, a phoneme model, this was the first time that we were building one of them. It was something that requires, as you know probably, is that typical AI models start to predict what the next word is, whereas a phoneme model has to understand exactly at a speech level what the student or the child is saying. Based on that, the phoneme model gets improved, and that is then fed into the AUGs, those virtual speech therapists we talked about. And then that, in turn, is then feeding the Ogma assistant saying how the student is doing. So you can see we're creating a cyclical approach for taking data from one side to improving our model, to then improving our agent, to then, again, improving the entire cycle and experience for patients. And this flow was quite complex, and it's super interesting to get into the technical weeds. I'm an engineer by background, so for me, even being a product manager now is like, this is exciting stuff that I love to play with. What we did is we took the raw audio file, we passed it to some diarization models. We did some word-level ASR to begin with. We did error checking on whether the child was saying the right words the right way with the right letters. And then what we did is we put it through a phoneme ASR, and then we get the final transcript, which then, with some voice synthesis, goes into that AUG that we were talking about. So you can see right here is like, a generic model is not going to do that for you. And so we realized that very quickly is like, in order to actually deliver value and show improvement for patients, we had to build something custom, we had to build something verticalized, and we had to build something that was based on the data that we were getting from that industry. And you can see right here, the experience is quite great, right? We have the therapist interacting with parents, the AUGs interacting with children. All of these data loops are ones that we try to feed into our model to keep getting it better and better and better every day. And therapists love it too. They never saw it as sort of competing. In a lot of ways, when we first went to market with that Ogma assistant that helped therapists take notes better, they said, I've been waiting for something like this my entire life. They are spending 30% of their time. They're seeing patients that should have received care 2 years ago, that at a point they're coming in, it's almost too late to help in certain cases. And so we're cutting that time, we're giving them the efficiency that they need, and then they in return start to trust our AUGs, which are those virtual speech and language therapists, because they see that it's very much trained on their data, trained on the way they do things, and they trust us as a platform because we've already been there from step one. And so, when we looked at the growth model of how do we launch this product, it was quite easy. We said we need to go free to market. As you can see, a lot of the AI tools that are out there start off free, and then we start to build off of that. So we started with the free Ogma assistant for speech and language therapists. We started to build data from that, so based on what their usage data, we started to see a 30% cut in their admin task, which was then feeding into our AUGs to then improve our AUGs in how they can treat patients, work with the children, help them much better, much like an actual human therapist would. And then we would start to see that cycle improve more and more. So we got about 55 referrals, completely 100% organic, 3 pilots within the first 6 months of actually launching the product. And we actually ended up signing with one of the NHS clinics as well. Again, all fully word of mouth, no ad dollars spent at all. The reason is because we believe product-led growth is what helps when it comes to AI. People need to see the value from day 0, or else they're not signing up. I'm going to move into the next one, which is jointly. Again, this is more of an insurance case. I think the important thing here is that we set up 5 different agents. So they were a multi-agent platform. The previous speaker talked about is we had agents performing specific tasks. So we talked about the first notification of loss agent, which was a voice-based agent. That agent was taking inputs from actual claims or actual customers filing claims. From there, we had an agent that was assessing the claim itself through images and descriptions from the client. And then we had another agent that was calling out to garages, so another voice agent that would basically say, okay, based on this work, we think this garage is the best one. Then we had another agent scheduling the actual repair, and then another agent actually fulfilling the claims payment itself. So you can see it's an orchestration of agents, of 5 different agents. What did that result in? Well, we looked at about 35% cut in admin time that was spent on this coordination. Customer satisfaction actually went through the roof. We had about an 18% or 18-point increase in NPS. And so you can see is compared to this is what the old system was, right? You can see at the top is the end client. They're talking to a claims operator. They're talking to a damage assessor. They're dealing with different garage networks. Data is flowing through many different places. No one really knows what's happening. Actually, a lot of the time, the end user ends up being the project manager of their own claim, and they have to call about 5, 10 different places to figure out what's actually happening. So what we did is, by introducing these 5 different agents, we used sort of a voice RAG interface on one end. We used, the ability to schedule and assess claims quite easily on one side. So you can see Clara was our ethanol agent, Lena being the one that actually assesses and validates the policy for each client. We had Jay, which was the repair options scout, so essentially figuring out which garages would work best for this specific claim. And then Roger was the one who would actually call out to the garage, call the front desk of garage and ask, hey, we have a job that needs to be done in the next 2 days. Do you think you can do it? Or we have something that needs to be fixed up by next week. Can you do it? And we saw a huge increase in the efficiency of claims being resolved, but also customer satisfaction as well. So, ultimately, what does that result in? If you look at the metrics, we saw sort of a 30% increase in the prediction accuracy of what the actual claim was and what needed to be done. Higher quality of data. We start to see the claims processing time become a lot faster, almost a 70% improvement on that metric. And then the big thing for insurance companies, it's a cost game, right? So how do you make sure that you're bringing down your costs as much as you can? And this is a modeling that we did. So on the left is what it takes to run a claim through a completely human interface. So you're looking at about $160, 160 pounds per claim. And on the right side, you can see is a full claim fulfilled through our agentic platform. And if you add all those numbers up, it adds up to about £6.41, which is a huge, huge increase. So imagine your operational costs still just coming down by a magnitude, and you're able to improve customer satisfaction. So not only are you decreasing the cost to fulfill claims, you're also improving the experience for customers as well. And again, if you look at it, you've seen this loop previously. It's a very similar methodology that we took when we launched this product into market. What we said is, let's put the Clara ethanol agent out into the market. So insurance employees can't resist trying it. We've sat down in exec meetings where the chief innovation officer of an insurance company is talking with this agent and absolutely loves it. We even did some cheeky stuff where we gave one of our agents a Scottish accent, and people apparently trusted a lot more than a typical AI accent. And we started to feed a lot more data on how claims were being fulfilled. From there, we started to see better data quality on what type of claims were coming in, what type of assessments were coming in, and we can start to improve that cycle a lot better. The insurers see a quick delight in our product. They right away see the value in it. They see in the efficiency that we provide to them. And then that only results in faster and cheaper claims, which hopefully, what we hope is results in cheaper insurance policies for end customers at the end of the day. So the next bit is I want to talk through a framework, but I will warn you. I asked AI, I said these are the steps I went through with building all these products. Can you give me a framework that makes sense? And it probably gave me the most corniest framework that's out there. It said SPECIAL, which is the acronym it told me to use. So you can almost guarantee that AI is not a good joke writer. At least that's still good with humans. But this is a simple framework of what I thought, the way we went about building these products. Now, it's one of those things where, when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to always think of like frameworks and start to apply them. But, what we tried to do is we document a lot of the actions we take along the way. And we started to see similarities along the different AI projects that we were building within our venture studio. And it started to align with these few steps that I'm going to talk through here. So the first little bit is scoping it out. And I really think, start narrow and you start to win fast. If I take Ogma, for example, we didn't give the full speech and language virtual agent from day one. What we did is let's first pair up with the speech and language therapist. Let's give them a tool that they love for free, that they will start to use and trust, and then we start to get recommended to their patients. Similarly with Jointly AI, we didn't build the whole 5 agents. We started with FNOL on the front end. That was a voice agent. Execs, we started to pitch it to insurers. They see that, it's something voice, it's something they're very used to. And then they start to love it. And then we start to build out other pieces of the puzzle. The next step is proprietary data. So I think this is somewhere where I think vertical agents really take you to a whole other level. I think, a typical prompting it with AI gets you about 70% of the way. But I really think, a lot of the proprietary data that you can access around, how do kids saying, are they saying tat rather than cat? How do you make sure that we're collecting metadata on a specific accident that's happened and making sure that, there isn't a level of fraud that's happening as well. So a few scenarios we started to stress test it with was we would put in, say that actually I have a Tesla car that had an accident, and we'd actually give it a Toyota, for example, as the image. And then it could quickly recognize, actually, hey, this isn't the car you described or the damage you described. Is there some issue, or should you go take the actual picture? And so we start to figure out, there are these proprietary data flywheels that we need to start building. Otherwise, there's no defensibility with the product. Then I think this is the engine bit that I was talking about, which is, the typical models get you 70% of the way, but fine-tuning is really what makes users realize that this is something built for industry. If you go to speech and language therapists, is like they're already bombarded with a huge caseload, a lot of patients to deal with, a lot of admin work. And if you're not fine-tuning it for the way they operate, then they're not going to adopt the solution, and that just results in failure. So I think fine-tuning really helps you figure out what it needs to look like. Same thing goes for insurers, right? Insurers are not going to trust a solution that isn't understanding the workflows that exist in the background within their claims process. The next bit is sort of this co-pilot, and I think, what we try to do with every product that we build is it isn't a black box. Humans are exactly able to see how the processing was done, how the decision-making was done. So with the phoneme models, we were quite transparent as to which ones were failing, what was the accuracy rate that we were getting week over week as the data was coming in. Same thing with insurers as well. We took sort of vague chats on FNOL and started to convert them into real conversations and real understanding of data and photo metadata. Same thing with in-guards and safe loops. Again, escalation is a huge bit. So it's what we believe is in a hybrid model where humans and AI are interacting and working together. So if you start to see issues that start triggering, our AIs were basically programmed so that it would flag it for the people working on it. Analytics. Part of it from day one, making sure that the phoneme errors were always minimal. We were tracking that on one side. And on the other side, we were making sure that, with Jointly, every claim was processed at the right time. If there were any issues with the accuracy of it, if there were any issues with the time to complete, we were making sure that that was being improved with every step along the process. And that's it. That's sort of my last little bit. I know I missed L, but essentially L was a combination of A and L, which is product-led growth, but I already talked about that quite a bit, so yeah.
Great. So anyone has questions?